What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Better late than never. With that said, I really love this series, The Rise Of. I already did Cena, Orton, Edge, Austin. There's still a lot more to come. I'll definitely do something on Rock, Ray, Booker T, Christian Cage, TNA. A bunch of stuff there. November's content will continue to be diverse, hopefully. I haven't made something on Edge and Y2J in a while, especially Y2J. More lower card stuff there, Probably Simon Dean, Jesse and Festus, Chuck Palumbo, the Hard Dynasty. I think I gotta do some stuff from there. I'll try to dive into classic ECW, starting off with RVD's television title reign. And yeah, the content, it looks good for this month. Another year review, maybe? I haven't done one of those in about 4 months. Who knows? Anyways, Mark Henry's story is pretty remarkable. To put it simply, say a team gets a first-round draft pick, the guy ends up being a bust. They want to get rid of him, but he wants to stay. And eventually the guy performs well right before his contract expires, and they want to keep him. That's Mark Henry. It took a while. Well, 9 years it took him for the guy to finally get informed and come into his own. So yeah. So in this video, we're going to look at Sexual Chocolate, Mae Young, World's Strongest Man, everything. Okay, right now let's get into it. Mark Henry was born in Silsbee, Texas on June 12, 1971. Henry as a child was a pretty big wrestling fan, and 1 year he attended a WWF show and tried hopping the barricade in hopes of touching Andre the Giant. Apparently a giant just grabbed him and placed him back behind the steel barricade. Honestly, I find it to be a weird story because of the fact that out of everyone that jumped the barricade, it was a future giant, and not only that, but a future wrestler that wrestled on the WWF. Henry came from a large family, and by the time he was 12, his weight and height were 5'5" and 225 pounds. As a child, Henry began weightlifting at the age of 10 or 12, conflicting, when his mother brought him a set of weights. He would suffer a setback when his father passed away when he was 12. Henry was also dyslexic, and at this point, he believed that he was living in the shadow of his brother, who was an all-American football star in high school. Anyways, Henry began pursuing powerlifting. He was also playing football, but after meeting Terry Todd, his future mentor, he suggested Mark focus solely on powerlifting and he'll find success. Todd was a father-like figure for Mark throughout his life. He helped him train in weightlifting, and Henry soon found success. He was winning a bunch of competitions, holding records by the age of 24. Mark Henry was widely considered to be one of the greatest lifters in history. There was so many accomplishments Henry achieved in such a short time. There's just a bunch of stuff there that just proves that he was one of the very best. Since he was so damn good, Henry was ready to compete at the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta. Around the same time period, Vince McMahon began negotiating with Mark Henry on the WWF contract. He made his first appearance, not debut I might add, on the March 11, 1996 episode of Raw when he press slammed Jerry Lawler. He was still focused on the Olympics though. He was captain of the US weightlifting team, but unfortunately suffered a back injury in the worst time possible. He dropped out and finished in 14th place, which was worse than his 10th place of 1992 in Barcelona. Apparently, what I could find, he was fed up with anabolic steroid use in the Olympics, and he believed that it was ruining the sport. Henry, however, he was still planning on competing in powerlifting competitions, just not in the Olympics. Okay, back to the WWF. Initially, Mark hung up the phone on Vince thinking it's just a prank, but the boss assured him he was legit. The exact contract details are honestly conflicting. I tried searching for this stuff. One source says $250,000 every year for 10 years. This is JR, I should note. Others say it was $1 million for each year. Either way, regardless, the talents in the back were jealous of Henry's contract, and so he gained heat. If you walk backstage back in the 90s and just breathe, you'll gain heat, simply put. Henry not only gained heat because of the contract itself, but because of the fact that he was a rookie. Dr. Tom Pritchard trained Henry, and The Rock, who was also living with Mark in his apartment. On TV, Mark Henry debuted around SummerSlam time, and he began a feud with Jerry the King Lawler. Lawler continuously provoked Henry leading up to the match at In Your House Mind Games. Once the bell rang, the King realized he bit a little more than he could chew. Henry dominated and forced him to submit. Okay, following the event, Henry suffered an injury that left him sidelined for a year. I believe the injury was a small part of the hiatus because he still needed to develop his in-ring skills. In his time away, Henry once again gained heat from the Clique, or whatever was left of it, and so he was sent to Canada. It wasn't a punishment, it was like a way of letting the heat cool down and letting him develop. He was sent to the Hart Dungeon to be precise, where he trained with Stu Hart, took care of the Hart's children, Brett and Owen, and it wouldn't be until December of 1997 where Mark Henry was finally back in the WWF. Upon his return, he joined The Nation. This was a great thing for Mark inside and outside the ring. He was a focal point of the show. Well, he was in the background, but still. He got to learn from Farouk and The Godfather, got to hang out with his friends The Rock and D'Lo, so it was all good. He never really stood out during the Nation's run, and it wasn't until the tail end that he actually had a storyline. During 1998, Mark Henry realized that even though he learned a bunch of submission holds in Stu Hart's dungeon, the WWF were looking to go more into the character-based wrestling. During a sit-down interview with Stone Cold on the Broken Skull Sessions, Mark Henry elaborated on how sexual chocolate came to be. Here are his words, quote for quote. "It was like the WWE was going back to being more entertaining and they wanted characters, and I was like, you know, I got this idea of kind of being like this ladies' man." And they were like, whatever. And I was like, nah, I think I'll call myself Sexual Chocolate and hang out with the ladies. D'Lo was like, there is no way they're gonna let you call yourself Sexual Chocolate. And I'll be damned, they liked it. Okay, his first storyline as this character was with China. You know how this began? Well, one night, The Rock wanted to send a message to Triple H, and so he had Mark Henry try to kiss China. He failed and received a chair shot from Shawn Michaels. They went back and forth, and after nearly destroying her on an episode of Raw, China returned the favor by costing Mark his match against Farouk. Despite getting his ass beat by her, or the DX guys, Henry took a liking towards the ninth wonder of the world. She was costing him matches left to right, and at the same time, China was receiving envelopes. What was contained in these envelopes? Well, apparently China was getting sued for sexual harassment. Henry, meanwhile, was reading poems. This one in particular got him some mild boost from the crowd. China, meanwhile, she was arrested for not appearing in court, and about a month later on the November 16th, 1998 episode of Raw, The War Zone, China finally returned. She appeared during Mark's match with Val Venus, and he had a big smile on his face. Despite losing due to the distraction, he just didn't give a damn. Henry greeted his girlfriend and said that they should forget about everything and just go out on a nice dinner. That's all. There's no strings attached. And he read a poem once again. She walked away. As for her response, it came the following week after costing Mark another match. He said that the whole lawsuit would go away if she just said yes to the date, and this time around, she accepted the stupid date. And so it's on. And now this thing, it was honestly the wackiest thing in the best way possible. Like, I thought it was fun. First of all, Mark wanted D'Lo to come along. He thought it was to give Henry confidence, but he ended up being a chauffeur. He's all confident, you know, he's got the blazer on, he's got the watch on, and then he just drops that hat on him, and he's like, what? Once China met up with Henry, she was reluctant to even go through with it, and all she wanted was for it to end. China noticed D'Lo, and Henry tried denying it. Anyways, Henry was cheap with the flowers at $1.99. Like, how could you, man? He took her to a restaurant, and he was doing all the talking. China, not so much. She was drinking. He wanted to dance the night away, and this is where things picked up. So apparently some guys wanted to dance with China, but she respectfully declined. Well, douches are douches, and so she blasted one of them. Henry took notice and manhandled the dudes before departing. From there, she began helping Mark win matches, and the name Sexual Chocolate was born. Unfortunately, though, Henry got a little in over his head and began associating himself with PMS. Add to that, he began bragging about the little date. Henry was losing matches, doing it in a damn building, and let's just say he lost focus, simply put. D'Lo was growing impatient one night, and it was time for his match. His music played, yet Mark was still in there. He never came out, and it wasn't until D'Lo lost that he ran out there wearing nothing but boxers and whipped cream. D'Lo didn't have any sympathy for Mark, and the following week, he apologized for China for all that he's done. She didn't come out, though. PMS came out, and it got worse. China came out and warned those two to stay away from her man. She kicked him right out of the ring, and he was shook. He was in the happiest way possible. Like, just look at him there. He's the happiest camper. China knocked down Jacqueline, and he was completely ecstatic. Okay, this is where things take an even bigger turn. On the first Raw of 1999, China brought out a woman by the name of Sammy. She confessed to Henry that she isn't enough woman, and basically what she's trying to say is that one woman is not enough for Mark Henry. He fainted in excitement. Now about Sammy, for some reason, Henry got down with her alone in the room. China, she was well aware of what went on, and she was ready to air the dirty laundry the following week, and she forced Henry to come clean. She was like, either I tell him or you do. His mother was in attendance, and everyone was confused. Henry admitted that he didn't do anything with Sammy, and he just wanted her to hand the tape over. But she didn't. As a matter of fact, she rolled the footage on the Titantron, and Henry was clearly enjoying himself when he felt something. The crowd went crazy, and China's friend is like, that's why they call me Sammy. China revealed all of this as a ploy, and she would never get together with Henry, even if the human race depended on it. That's how bad it was. And then she low-blowed him for good measure, and that wasn't even it. His mother took him to the back and gave him a little spanking. Following this, Henry continued teaming up with D'Lo, turning into a babyface. Also, what the hell is he wearing here? It's a damn wrestling match. Even D'Lo told him that himself. Anyways, Henry would turn on D'Lo at SummerSlam, joining forces with Jeff Jarrett. As a result of this, Double J decided to reward Sexual Chocolate with the European Championship. Note, this was Henry's first title at this point, and he was the GOAT European Champion next to Midian. With that said, Henry didn't even hold the title for long. He continued being a ladies' man, a bad one at that. And at Unforgiven, D'Lo Brown finally recaptured the title. JR was going crazy over it. Rightfully so. I mean, it's D'Lo. He's awesome. And later that week, Mark Henry revealed something. He revealed that he's got an addiction.
I'm a sex addict. What? What did he say?
The guy, he was just in tears over this. Every day he thinks about unimaginable things. Lunch, night, sleep. He's always thinking about it. He received therapy over the next couple of weeks. He revealed his first sexual encounter was at 8 years old, and it was his sister. The crowd was shook, and so was the therapist. This is attitude error for you, I guess. She asked if he still does it with his sister, to which he responded, and he's like, 2 days ago. Things got worse when Mark Henry faced his former nation partner, the Godfather, in a Hojack match. What? Apparently, his therapist booked him in this match, and he ended up losing. It wasn't like he was focused, like she intended it to be, and after the match, the hose latched onto him. So, in an effort to find focus, get back on track, he got a male therapist. Apparently, the guy wanted some sexual chocolate, and he ran away. For some reason, the male idea in Mark's head was dumb, so he decided to go for an older woman. Funny enough, she was actually the one who wanted some. So this whole therapy thing was dumb in his mind. It was bad, and he decided to go to the one person that has experience with women, the Godfather. So Godfather's talking, and he basically enabled the damn addiction. And then, the biggest twist of 1999 occurred. I don't think anybody saw this coming at all. Mark Henry turned on the Godfather. So what you're telling me is that Henry has the girls nearly the entire day, yet still isn't satisfied. And since Godfather lost this match per stipulation, Viscera gets them. And where is Henry going with them? I mean, they're not his girls. They're Viscera's now, huh? And what is this tag team? Viscera at the time, he had this dark character that was vile or something like that. And Mark Henry was the outgoing type, the lazy man. And it just didn't make sense to me. Mark Henry's performances outside the ring affected his performances inside the ring. He was taking L's. Viscera thought he was useless and turned on him. And you'd think this was after 3 months, but it was only after 3 days. The crowd didn't give a damn, which was honestly hilarious. And forget the Big Show, Mark Henry's the one who turns a lot. Once Henry returned, he was obviously a babyface and he began going out with Mae Young. So eventually she got pregnant and gave birth to a head. What? Many believe these storylines were thrown at Mark for him to quit, but he just didn't. He refused to quit. He wanted to improve, basically. That's what it was. Shortly afterwards, he was sent down to Ohio Valley Wrestling in order to improve his wrestling skills. He was also sent down there to improve his stamina, his mic skills, all that. It was like Henry was back to square one. Well, he was. It was very humbling to be sent down there, and Henry learned that he knew nothing beforehand, basically. He literally said this himself in that Broken Skull session interview. Big Show was also down there at the time. And yeah, it's weird that these two, the future of the WWE, were stuck in developmental after being stars on the main roster beforehand. Henry down there, he was honing his skills, but there was a big tragedy in his life. His mother passed away. Around the same time, Mark was powerlifting once again, and Vince told him to take as much time off as possible. Whatever you need, just go do it. Yeah. So he's back into training, getting in form, and he tells Vince that he's going back into powerlifting. Why? Because some guys insulted him. So he meets up with Vince, and the boss is like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mark was like, "Yes," and Vince tells him, "I don't have a place for the second strongest man in the world." That got me nervous, and I'm not even Mark Henry. Funny enough, at the 2002 Arnold Strongman Classic, Henry earned the moniker of the world's strongest man. He also won $75,000 and a Hummer. Impressive. It's something like out of a movie. He was motivated and he saved his career with that victory. And if you think about it, the WWF had the world's strongest man on their roster. Be it if he was the best or even the worst wrestler in the world, there was some legitimacy and usefulness to that moniker. Even if the Great Khali was called the world's strongest man, he would have been useful for the company. That's what I'm trying to say. In April of 2002, Mark Henry returned on the SmackDown brand. He was a babyface and the roster began placing bets over Henry's strength. He held a limo in place, he lifted a vehicle, Test was a big dower of his in both of these challenges. Hell, he arrogantly claimed he can lift the car himself, but he couldn't. Mark did it successfully, and that's how he was getting himself over in the beginning. Also, Test scammed Farouk, as you can see here. So yeah. His theme song, it reminds me of SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, honestly. Actually, the whole attire, the look, the entrance, everything reminds me of SmackDown Shut Your Mouth. With that said, on the April 25th, 2002 episode of SmackDown, Christian, believing he's going to win some free money over this bet, asked Mark to bend a frying pan. He did it and Test asked to bend a rod. So it was double or nothing. Successful once more, and so Christian whacked them with that pan. Later that night, Mark Henry made his first in-ring appearance in about 2 years. Christian was completely embarrassed and was made to look like a joke. Following this, Mark didn't really do much of note. He was training for another weightlifting competition, but he didn't go through with it. And in October 2002, Henry suffered a knee injury that left him sidelined for 5 months. Again, upon his return, he was back in OVW. This time around, he was just getting in form, I believe. He was wrestling here and there, honing his skills and whatnot. He was improving on the mic. That's one thing to note. Mark Henry, he was getting work done on his microphone skills. On the August 25th, 2003 episode of Raw, Mark Henry made his return. This time around, it was a much bigger deal. Theodore Long wanted to expand his thuggin' and buggin' enterprises, and so Henry contacted him. This was basically a tryout match. He was set to earn his player's card in the White Boy Challenge. Mark made Cade and Jindrak look like enhancement talent. Henry passed with flying colors, and so he joined the faction. The tag team of Rodney Mack and Mark Henry were scoring W's all across the board, but Rodney Mack unfortunately suffered an injury, and so Mark was back to being a single star. Now, honestly, I think if this team lasted, they could have won the world titles. You never know. I mean, Mark Henry was getting pushed massively. He was facing Shawn Michaels. He was facing Goldberg. He was in the major matches. That's what I'm trying to say. He feuded with Booker T for a short time before once again coming up with an injury in February of 2004. This time, Mark tore his quadriceps muscle, leaving him out until 2005. And man, that just got me sad. I believe Jim Ross, head of talent relations at the time, was telling Vince to just cut his costs with Mark. At this point, the world's strongest man was under contract for 9 years, with not much to show for it in a way. And once again, it was back to OVW. He goes there for like a month, and then it was time to get called up. This time, though, he was called up for good. I already covered a part of this in the Eminem video, but once again, I gotta remind you about it. On the December 30, 2005 episode of SmackDown, Mark Henry made his return after nearly 2 years away. He attacked Batista and cost him the Tag Team Championships. Shortly afterwards, the Animal suffered an injury and the Rumble program was scrapped. So Mark Henry feuded with Kurt Angle. On the January 13, 2006 episode of SmackDown, the world's strongest man competed in a 20-man battle royal for the vacant World Championship. At this point, Mark Henry was number 1 in kayfabe in my eyes. I mean, you can't tell me John Cena was on top. He lost the title in Elimination Chamber. Batista was injured. Edge won the title by cheating, so Henry was number 1. He had to be. Anyways, during the match, Henry threw out everybody in his way. He slammed Kurt Angle through the announce table, and all he had to do was eliminate Ray. Mr. 619 gave Henry a hard time, but it was just that. A hard time, because Mark tossed him out like a bag of potatoes. Unknowingly to him, Angle was never eliminated, and he was on beast mode. Definitely one of my favorite battle royals. Kurt Angle had to utilize sheer determination, skill, passion, heart in order to eliminate, or barely eliminate, Mark. It was one of the best stand moments in SmackDown history. Anyways, Daivari became Mark Henry's manager, and the world's strongest man challenged for the gold at the Royal Rumble. This was the first one-on-one world title match. Hell, it was the very first title match he ever got. He never received a world title match in general. Never. Despite being unsuccessful, Henry was still a major player. He didn't even lose clean. The guy was booked like a monster, and the wrestling machine couldn't even dethrone him the proper way. Meanwhile, WrestleMania opponents were being considered for The Undertaker, and the guy that was at the top of the list, Kurt Angle, was busy with Rey Mysterio and Randy Orton. Other than Angle, there's only one other person, Mark Henry. On the March 3rd episode of SmackDown, Mark Henry interfered in what was perhaps the greatest SmackDown main event ever. Why did he do this? Well, he likes to be a party pooper. Not only that, Taker tombstoned him in a match. He let out the dead man with a 10-star frog splash through the announce table, and he was dead. Shortly afterwards, a match was made for WrestleMania. The Undertaker versus Mark Henry in a casket match. At Saturday night's main event, Daivari was claiming Henry wasn't scared of The Undertaker and caskets, and Henry himself shouted that Taker's the one who's afraid of him. He promised to shove the dead man in the coffin if it's the last thing he'll do. And out he came, the Druids and The Undertaker. They brawled then and there, and Henry brought the fight. He didn't back down. The dead man recovered, and Daivari received a chokeslam and a tombstone on top of the casket, and he wasn't to be seen with Mark Henry following this. On the final SmackDown before WrestleMania 22, Mark Henry gave a eulogy for The Undertaker's undefeated streak. He listed every victim of the streak, from the Superfly to the Legend Killer. But, in Henry's eyes, that was the past. The future is here. He then said that the future is in him. He's not wrong about that. And he's the one who took out Batista. He's the one who pinned the world champion, and he's the one that will end The Undertaker at WrestleMania. You know, about that one, I actually did some searching, and the WWE actually considered ending it with Henry. They obviously thought Angle was the right choice, but Rey Mysterio had to get his moment, so there's that. Now, about the match, it was decent. There's no doubt in my mind it was Mark's best match in WWE up to this point. Taker really put in work, and while it wasn't the best match on the card, it wasn't the worst either. We all know Taker won to go 14-0. After WrestleMania, the world's strongest man cost Kurt Angle World Championship gold. He had another splash through the table, and thus, the feud was reignited. Now, one thing to note about this match is the fact that both men, they were two former Olympians, and hell, Angle even claimed they met in the Summer Olympics during the feud. In the weeks leading up to the match, Henry opened a beta version of the Hall of Pain. He destroyed Paul Burchill and Matt Hardy back to back. Around the same time, he got some new music, somebody's gonna get their ass kicked. That song, it fits him to a T. Kurt Angle wasn't 100%, but despite this, he did struggle to best Mark Henry and lost by countout. But Angle had the last laugh. He completely obliterated Mark, forced him to tap out to the ankle lock, and this is my favorite part. He just whacks him with a chair and the table collapsed like cards. And after Judgment Day, despite getting his ass beat by Angle, Mark continued to be built up as the unstoppable monster. He even had 3-6 Mafia perform his entrance song, and can't get more badass than that. He's got to stay fly when he enters the ring, right? That same night, he took out Chris Benoit, and his attitude, I'll stop when I'm ready. Damn. He was really starting to come into his own. He was getting it. The destruction continued heading into July of 2006 when Mark obliterated Ray and Chavo. I also find it funny that he was booked better than the world champion. But have no fear, Batista is here. Henry, though, was sick and tired of hearing about the animal, and hell, if Batista comes out and fights him, he said that he's going to get his ass whooped and it will be the shortest return in wrestling. At the end of the night, he finally returned. Straight up, he called out Mark, and out he came. Like JBL said, it was on like a pot of neck bone. Except, Mark didn't want none. Rey Mysterio, who had some business coming out here, attacked and he got his ass whooped. Batista made Henry look like a jobber up tenfold. And I will rise up. So these two were ready to face off at the Bash, right? Well, a week before the event, Mark Henry tore his patellar tendon right off the bone. Since he needed surgery, the match was off. To me, the Great American Bash of 2006 is the second most cursed event in WWE history. What's first? WrestleMania 36. Anyways, Henry was out for 7 months. This time around, he never went away. In May of 2007, vignettes aired signaling Mark's arrival. He made an abrupt return following the conclusion of the iconic steel cage match. For some reason, he went after the champ himself, The Undertaker, and his attack caused one of the most shocking cash-ins ever when Edge came out and stole the title like a piranha. Anyways, Henry during this time period was somewhat a major player, but he wasn't doing much. If there was one moment where he could have been world champion, it was this match. But it makes sense why he didn't go through with it. I mean, the last two champs were injured, and they didn't want a third. But Khali holding the title upside down is still the funniest thing ever. One thing to note is that Henry signed a 10-year contract back in 1996. It was renewed for 1 year, 2007, and it was set to expire in the fall of 2007. The expectations was Henry was a goner, so they're going to make the best out of him before he departs. That's by main eventing Unforgiven against The Undertaker. In the weeks leading to the event, Mark destroyed a bunch of jobbers, including Corey Graves, Eugene. The Undertaker's Druid, he failed at attacking him because he just disappeared, and Taker was playing mind games with him. So he decided to play his own on the final SmackDown before Unforgiven. He mocked Taker's Hocus Pocus, and he claimed that the dead man's power pales in comparison to his. And he doesn't need Hocus Pocus because his power is reality or something like that. And the dead man struck once again. A video package played of The Undertaker in some cave saying the word Unforgiven, and Henry showed fear. Lightning struck in the arena, and the Undertaker's voice echoed throughout the arena, and he informed Mr. Henry that he's going to rest in peace. Now, about their match of Unforgiven, I find it weird how they main evented, but it is what it is. Heading into the match, Henry agreed to terms on a new contract, so he's going to remain in the company. The assumption was that he was going to retire, but that wasn't the case. Anyways, the match wasn't memorable, and there was no way in hell that Henry was going to come out winning. It had more of a SmackDown main event feeling to it rather than pay-per-view main event feeling, in my opinion. Mark, though, was resilient, and he wasn't going to go down without a well-fought battle. The Undertaker actually had to hit the last ride in order to win the match. Now, following Unforgiven, Henry began floating around between ECW and SmackDown. He was more of a notable star, but he wasn't notable at the same time. It's hard to describe, but that's what it was. He was main eventing Raw and SmackDowns, but he wasn't appearing at WrestleMania. That's what it is. In June of 2008, Henry was drafted to the ECW brand, and he found immediate success defeating the champion Kane on his first night as an official member of the roster. Now, initially, the ECW title match for Night of Champions was between Kane and Big Show, but Mark finagled his way in. And so, at Night of Champions, Mark Henry made history. First of all, what the hell is that? Second, the match itself wasn't bad. But yes, Henry, he took advantage. While Big Show and Kane were killing each other, he caught Kane off guard with a 450-pound splash to capture the ECW championship. Finally, Mark Henry, at last, he's a champion. This is the first title he's ever won, and no, the European Championship doesn't count. He essentially received the title. But after 12 years in the company, Mark, he's finally won a title. It was a long time coming, and the world's strongest man definitely deserved a title for being persistent in wanting to improve. He wanted to be a success so damn badly. He got in form, he was getting in shape, he was losing weight, he was doing work. He was doing hard work in order to get to this point. So yeah, That's what I'm trying to say. And yeah, that's the rise of Mark Henry. Will I dive into his ECW title reign? Yeah, I'll try it, hopefully. You know, he was with Tony Atlas. He was wrecking Colin Delaney or whoever, Tommy Dreamer or something like that. So yeah, it might be interesting. The Hall of Pain thing, I'm craving that one. If you guys already seen it, you know, it was 14 minutes. I personally don't like that video. It is one of my favorites, but I just don't like how it was made. I'll definitely make a remake. It'll be much longer, befitting. And I missed out a couple of details there, so yeah. Overall, Mark Henry's story, just tremendous. From sexual chocolate all the way up to ECW champion. Man, it's so crazy how this guy never got released. Like, Vince could have cut his costs with him back in 02, 01, but he didn't, I guess. It's just so weird to think about, but yeah. Henry, he worked through all the pain, all the suffering in order to get to this point. What did you guys think of Mark Henry's story? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit a splash on the like button and perhaps the world's strongest slam on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.